Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Tuesday, December 26, 2017, day after Christmas, our second show of the day. And once again, your daily dose of happy. And Wendy, it's been an exciting holiday season that's finally drawn to a close, but lots of great stuff happening. And I hope you had a holiday season that was one to remember.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about it.
Okay, well, good. Then I feel kind of the same way, too, because this was a rather unique one for me in the sense that this year, for the first time leading into the holiday season, I was actually doing activities that I really love in the podcast. The podcast has been like the big part of my life for the last couple of months. So this is a holiday season where I was like really psyched. I don't normally get really psyched for the holidays, but I did this time of year. So, it's been a good thing.
Tell us how your family Christmas went.
Oh, well, let's see. We went to Rhode Island to be with Louise's brother and sister-in-law and their two sons, and also her step-siblings, because Louise's mother died when she was 21, and her father remarried a number of years later, and her stepmother, Ruth, had her own kids already, so they were, the step-brother, step-sister. And so this was like the second year that we'd actually done a Christmas with everybody from those two families together, which was something that her stepmother had wanted for many years, right up until the point where she died. And we finally said, well, okay, maybe we should actually start doing it. So, better late than never, right? But no, it was good. It was a really nice holiday. It was very... It was one of those things where you go into it and you wonder how everything's going to work out in terms of the personalities and so forth. And as it turned out, it was just a really nice, comfortable celebration. The meal was good. The conversation was great. There were no controversies. There was nothing like that. It was just a really, really nice holiday.
Wow.
It was good. It was good.
That's fabulous.
And in fact,
so now because, our show is about law of attraction, do you even have a recollection of what you were focused on or what you were thinking about that led into that?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, because leading up to the Christmas holiday, this past Friday, we were out doing some shopping at the grocery store. Christmas shopping was done, so we didn't have to do that part. But we were at the grocery store getting some last-minute groceries done, mainly for us, but also a couple things for what we were bringing. And it was a really remarkable situation, because as you and I talked about on Wednesday, or on Friday rather, everything went smoothly. I mean, remember how we talked about how everybody was, the aisles were packed and everybody was saying, oh, excuse me, oh, sure, let me through, all that kind of thing. Everybody was really, really friendly. Well, it turns out that experience at the supermarket was only the beginning, because the entire weekend went like that. So it was like, that's about where I first noticed the whole thing starting. But it was just one nice event after another. The other thing I wanted to tell you about, too, is last year it's about from where we live to Rhode Island to their house, it's about, an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on traffic. And last year, of course, we were there on Christmas Eve and got there, we were there pretty late into the evening, and then all of a sudden we had to drive home, and we're looking at our watches, and like, oh goodness, we can't really stay long, and we ended up staying late, and it was kind of tiring to get home at that hour. You're driving home arriving at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. It's a little bit late. So we decided this year we're going to stay in a motel. That way we can just stay as late as we want. Don't have to worry about it. 10 minutes, we're in bed, we're asleep, no problem. So that's what we did. Now, I have to tell you a side story. The side story is that Louise always likes to have snow at Christmas. And, in New England, you have a decent chance of that. It doesn't always work out. Many years you don't get snow at Christmas, but, it does happen at least some of the time. But she was really hoping for it this year. And we actually had snow earlier in December, and that was really nice. She liked that a lot, but it melted about 4 or 5 days before. So the ground was basically bare. And Christmas Eve, once again, the ground was still bare. So we go there, and we'd heard that there was some snow in the forecast, but it wasn't really clear when it was coming. Now, here's where the law of attraction comes into it. Louise said to me, can you help me manifest the snow? Now, we have I think I've told you we have experience in the past where we have done some things to influence weather patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, sure, yeah. Well, we made one little mistake. We forgot to specify when.
I've done that one too.
And it worked like a charm, just not on the schedule I had in mind. So bottom line is we woke up Christmas morning after having had that beautiful party with her family and woke up to find that there was snow in the air, that looking at the weather map, sure enough, you could see the massive snowstorm was going right over the travel path. And it looked like on the map that we were possibly going to be missing most of it, just the way the route was going and the way the storm was going. I kind of thought we were just going to come behind it, so to speak. No such luck. We got 10, 15 minutes away from the motel after checking out and found ourselves in a blinding snowstorm to the point where it was 20 feet of visibility.
Oh, no.
Which leads to the axiom, be very careful what you wish for.
Oh, golly, you're so right.
So,
but did Louise at least enjoy the white Christmas?
Well, eventually. First, we had to get through that little section where we're at 20 feet, because 20 feet of visibility is pretty short in a car. Where that's pretty close to not being able to discern the landscape because it's all white. And it was a little bit nerve-wracking. I was comfortable because I knew I was driving. I knew that when you have what I saw on the weather map, I mean, it was very clear we weren't going to get more than a few inches of snow anyway. It wasn't like this was going to be the surprise 1 to 2 foot snowstorm with 3 inches an hour or something like that. So I knew that it wasn't going to last real long. And she said to me, well, you want to turn back? I said, absolutely not. Just give it another 10, 15 minutes. It's going to start clearing up. And sure enough, after some very painstaking 10 to 15 mile per hour driving, it started to clear up. So that by about 20, 25 minutes into it, visibility had increased to 50 feet and then to 100 feet. And then all of a sudden it started to clear up. So the rest of the trip back was actually pretty good. It was just that one little section that was a little bit nerve-wracking, shall we say. But it was good. It was a good trip. And what the nice part is, right after you have a snowstorm, you know how the trees are all laced with the little bits of snow all over them. It's like, this winter wonderland kind of a thing. So the rest of the trip was just, it was like a Christmas card the rest of the way. So the last third of the trip was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So it was all great, just one little part that was a little nerve-wracking, but the rest of it was wonderful.
That is so cool.
And once again, an object lesson.
She got her white Christmas.
She got her white
even
Christmas.
Even if it wasn't exactly the timing you had expected.
And it's an absolutely perfect lesson in making sure you're very specific about what it is you're asking for.
Absolutely. That reminds me, when, we were planning for our Christmas, I had family coming from 3 different sections of Texas, one of which was 3 hours away, but that family was going to have to come in 3 different cars. So we really wanted the weather to be good for them, and like 10, 15 days out, what was forecasted on the day they would be traveling, actually they'd be traveling on 2 or 3 different days, it was going to be icy and sleety and ugly. And so I thought, okay, well, we're 15 days out. I can plan for this.
Okay.
What I've come to learn is when you have enough ramp-up time, you can easily influence the weather the way you want, because the weather has time for all the patterns to shift.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had like a 3-day block, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I wanted it to be bright and sunny and clear, like no precipitation, bright and sunny. I was not concerned about the temperature, although Saturday there were some things that we were going to do outside, so I wanted it to be at least in the upper 40s, 50s. So it's like those were kind of loose parameters, but as the days were getting closer, I was seeing the weather pattern shift, and what I asked for in terms of weather was exactly what happened, because we were having major precipitation, and boom, I mean, it was pouring rain Friday night, By
Yep.
Saturday morning, it was bright, sunny, and dry.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
not even any humidity left over in the air. It was amazing. And now today, because today could be whatever it wanted, it's dreary and rainy outside, but everybody's already traveled home safely, so it's all good.
So it's okay. Yeah. Yeah. Whether you have permission to go back to your normally scheduled programs.
Yeah. So, last week we had talked about my expectations for my family Christmas and how we started out with 10, and I have my brother and my niece is now newly engaged, and her fiance really wants to have a relationship with his soon-to-be father-in-law.
Right. Sure.
But my brother, who is the soon-to-be father-in-law, will have nothing of it.
Mm.
And so, I was just putting out my sense of, I was looking for some level of bondedness between the two of them to occur. And so then my family Christmas went from 10 to 14 because another part of our family all of a sudden was able to adjust their plans, and they were going to join us. And so now my thought of having all 10 of us around a table where it would kind of sort of force my brother to have to be at least at the same table as his new soon-to-be son-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
Now I couldn't force that to happen because now we had to be, we had to have two tables in two different rooms. And so I just went, you know what, I'm going to trust the universe to manifest this however the universe wants to orchestrate it. My desire is simply that they begin to create a bond.
Okay.
And that was all I was asking for. And then, of course, that all of us would have a good time and we would have family connectedness.
Sure.
And so what was so fascinating to me is, we kind of did it buffet style, and as everybody was getting their plates, I kind of said, because the kids were going, do we have a kids table and adults table? I said, nope, you all are grown adults. The youngest one is 16. So I said, you all are adults, no kids versus adults. Everybody go wherever you choose to go. And I'll be darned if my brother didn't end up sitting 2 chairs away from his soon-to-be brother-in-law. And I'm like, I didn't even orchestrate that. That was so perfectly well done. And as the day, I'll go forward to the very end, I was talking to my soon-to-be brother-in-law, or nephew-in-law, I think is what you would call it. And I just looked at him and I said, so how do you think you're doing in terms of having a relationship with my brother? And he looked at me and he said, he looked me in the eyes today. That's the first time he's ever done that, ever.
Wow.
And he goes, so I think we're making a little bit of progress. And he had a big smile on his face, like he felt so hopeful. And he said, I so desire to have a conversation with him because, I know he's so smart. He knows just about everything. And he goes, I'd love to just have conversation with him. I could learn so much from him. And it was just such a beautiful expression of the desire that he had to really be able to connect with my brother. And I was just thrilled that that did happen for him. But overall, it's like we knew that everybody planned on leaving by 6 o'clock. We started at noon. They were going to leave by 6 because everybody had to get back to their respective homes. They all had jobs to do tomorrow, etc. And people didn't start leaving until 8.
Wow.
Because everybody was so engaged in conversation. And we had like 5 different pods of conversations, and then they would change form. But, I mean, I went to bed with a big smile on my face because it was a wonderful day. We all got along really well. And the fact that, the bonding that I had set that I really wanted to see happen, I even saw how it was starting to happen, where my brother, what he had done in the past is he would literally turn his back every time this young man was in the room.
Wow.
It's like he just could not look at him. He could not be facing his direction. And I saw where throughout the day that was no longer the case. Even if they weren't conversing, my brother wasn't turning his back on him anymore. And I'm like, yes, this is progress.
That's very cool because I know how important it was to you to be able to have that. And you manifested exactly what you hoped would happen, even though it seemed like it was getting out of control, which is the way manifestations always happen. They never happen straightforward. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it never happens the way you think it does.
Never.
And that's why I had kind of started to recognize I was trying to control it and orchestrate it a little bit too much. And that's when I went, oh, Wendy, just let go of this, because the universe can orchestrate this in a way that is so beyond what I could possibly do. And so I just let go and said, whatever happens, happens. And I love how things did turn out.
That's terrific.
So,
That's a win. Everybody winning everywhere.
Yeah. And I did have a private conversation with my brother, about the situation. And I got to, just feel his discomfort. And I said, I know, this is your little girl getting married. And, I just could see in my brother's face this sense of I'm not ready to let her go. And I said, I know, but you did a great job with her, and she picked a wonderfully charming man who adores her. It's all going to be good. And then I got to have a one-on-one with my sister-in-law, who's the mother-to-be,
right.
The mother-in-law-to-be,
right.
And she said, no, she said, I'm okay with this. And she said, I wasn't, but I am now. I've gotten to a much better place. And I said, well, I think with you being in an okay place with this marriage to be, I said, I think this is going to help, my brother, who's her husband, come around. And she said, yeah, he's going to come around. And so just even having those little private conversations made me feel like just talking about it, we were stirring up the energy, because I know with law of attraction, that's really what law of attraction requires in order to move things along in a certain direction. It needs energy where there's something being broadcast. And so I kind of did my part in helping the broadcast signal go out that everything's going to be okay. And when they get married in October, everybody will be on the same page. And so that felt delightful, that was definitely put in motion. So, yay!
Yeah, yay indeed. You had a lot of victories in all that. That was just one win after another. Fantastic. So
it was.
Kudos.
Well, and so that kind of brings me to the topic that we're going to talk about today, which is expressing love, appreciation, acknowledgement, and celebration. Because even though I have just done that, I've done a bit of expressing my appreciation and celebration for all that went down. Whenever you get a room full of people together, it's just fascinating to pay attention to what people talk about and how they talk about it.
Oh, yeah. Especially in a family.
Go ahead. Especially what?
I was just saying, especially in a family, because family dynamics are ingrained practically in steel, and whenever there's any kind of shift that goes on, it's pretty major. So you had not only some major shift going on, but from what you're talking about, it sounds like those dynamics really shifted for the better.
They did. And there was this one point I was my kitchen sink is really close to the kitchen table where almost everybody was congregated in their conversation. The kids were all off somewhere else, like doing tech things, but the adults were kind of all hanging in one area. And so while I was doing the dishes, I was able to listen to the conversation going on, which was really an interesting vantage point, because I wasn't sitting at the table to actually add to the conversation, but I could be kind of like the fly on the wall.
Right.
So I was listening.
Right. And
the conversation somehow geared toward talking about somebody that, like, I think my sister was friends with this gal, like when they were in high school. And so it's like, hey, have you seen so-and-so? And it's like, yeah. And it's like, even though my family is all in different parts of Texas now, they still all are connected to this same group of people that they knew in high school. And so they just kind of started talking, and then it was like, oh, well, did you hear that they're not together anymore? And it's like, no, well, what happened? And it's like, well, I saw such and such on Facebook. And I was like, oh, the family was now engaged in some really juicy gossip sessions. And so I'm just listening, and I'm listening, and I'm listening. And after a while, I thought, this conversation, in my interesting point of view, wasn't exactly going in any edifying, positive, uplifting place. And not that, that's the end of the world, but I just thought, well, we've kind of spun this one into the ground, or, the family did, and I didn't even know these people, so I had nothing to participate in or contribute. So I finish the dishes, and I come and I sit down, and I join the family, and they're still talking. It's like, oh, well, this one was cheating. Well, how long has that been going on? Well, I think it's been going on for this long. And, oh, really? You're kidding? And it was all this, like, really big soap opera kind of stuff, which, honestly, I was kind of surprised because I don't hear my family talking like that very often. But, I kind of have a thing, like, I really garner the kind of environment that I want to be a part of. And if I couldn't change the conversation, I would probably go hang out with my geeky younger ones and go do something with them in their technology world. But I just didn't want to stay in a world, or even at a table where there was a bunch of gossipy stuff going on because it didn't feel good.
Sure.
And so I jokingly said, so, want to change the topic? And it stopped. It literally made everyone stop for a moment. And I said, hey, did y'all know I'm a #1 bestseller? And they looked at me and went, uh-huh. And like not skipping a beat, that went right back into their gossip. And I sat there and went, well, that was an interesting little experiment. I mean, I wasn't doing it on purpose, but my girlfriend, who I've been telling you is living with me right now, she was part of my family Christmas, and she got to witness what I witnessed. And this morning we were talking about it, and that's kind of where my topic came up from, because I said I wasn't upset or disappointed that my family didn't stop and go, oh, wow, Wendy, good for you. I'm so pleased. That must be such an accomplishment to have been a part of a book that went to #1. I wasn't, it's like those would have been nice words.
Sure, oh yeah.
But I wasn't disappointed that it didn't happen because I don't have an expectation with my particular family that I would get that from them. And that's why acknowledgement and having somebody really celebrate with me is something I do with a different group of people and not my family, unfortunately. And I was saying to my girlfriend this morning, I said, this is typical for my family. I said, we did not grow up with expressions of love. We didn't grow up with expressions of celebrating each other's triumphs or acknowledging when somebody went through a hardship or even like went through a great success. And she goes, really? And I said, yeah. I said, I know other families do that. Not like every family, but I've seen other families that really rally around somebody and really do beautiful expressiveness when somebody has triumphed with something great. I said, but my family was never like that. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today is just, how do we get to the point that we can be like that? Is that important? Is it not important? Are we trained with it? Are we not trained with it? So, I have more I can say on that, but I'm just kind of curious, like from your growing up, Walt, did people in your family take notice when you did something that was really like cool? And did they celebrate it and acknowledge it? Or was it just kind of like, yeah, whatever, and move on?
It was somewhere in between. It wasn't a lack of an acknowledgement, but it was always low key. There was never any big celebrations. So, if you, I don't know, if you got straight A's on your report card, it was like, whoa, you got straight A's in your report card. That's great. And that was about it. It wasn't like it wasn't acknowledged. It was acknowledged. We just weren't a particularly emotive family. We didn't emote a lot. There wasn't, except for my sister. My sister has sort of a dramatic aspect to her personality, so she could be somewhat mercurial about it in terms of getting excited and so forth. But the rest of us, no, it was always very low key. Now, I can say that with the Christmas we just had, I had not quite the same situation. It really wasn't. But I had a somewhat parallel situation in that I was in a conversation with the stepbrother and his wife, and their stepson was their son, so the step-nephew, I guess that is. I'm not sure what that is. But Daniel doesn't seem to have an idea. I feel bad for him. But Jonathan and Laura, I was having a conversation with them, and somehow it went into something that had a negative twist to it. I can't even tell you what the negative twist was because I was so focused on just staying positive that it didn't even stick with me. But what I did do is after they had voiced a couple of minutes worth of it, I said, it's probably not the best idea to be focusing on talking about whatever it was, because then you tend to get more of it. And that just kind of stopped him. And so I said, well, what we could do instead is we could talk about, and I laid out something else. And so we started doing that. And here's the funniest part, Wendy. The funniest part is I'm the one who stumbled first and went back to the wrong topic. And Jonathan said, wait a minute. And Laura said, wait a minute. I said, oh, you're right. Sorry. So I actually got them on board with now, Jonathan and Laura are not my family. So it's not the same thing as having a family dynamic. But I just thought it was interesting that there was that opportunity. I took advantage of it, and it worked. It actually worked. So maybe it doesn't work as easily in a family dynamic, but it can certainly work in a social situation outside of your family. That much I did prove. As long as I, stuck to my own word.
Well, you were talking about the straight A report card.
Right.
This is how it went down in my family. Now, I'm not going to say this for anybody to feel sorry for me, because to me it has a positive ending. But, I grew up in a family of 4 kids and parents, so 6 of us are sitting around the dinner table, and I got my report card before anybody else did, because everyone they were younger in different schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very, very pleased. I was so ecstatic. I couldn't wait to show this to my father. And so he and I sit next to each other at the dining room table. And so I show him my report card. And I've just got this childhood sense of, I know you're going to be so excited for me. I just know you are. That's what's inside of me, right? Because I want to say I was probably 9 years old. I think I was, or 8 years old. It was like the 5th grade or something.
Okay.
And so he looks at it. And he takes a few moments to really study it, and he goes, 3 A+. And I'm like, yes, I'm beaming. And he goes, why weren't they all A+?
Oh, dear. Oh, no.
Now, the other 4 were A's. I had 7 grades, 4 A's and 3 A+. I'm thinking, this is a stellar report card. And he just looks at me and goes, why aren't they all A+? Now, on the surface, that's devastating. But here's how I grew up, and here's what I had already come to know about my dad, even at that young age. My father doesn't know how to give words of praise.
Uh-huh.
I knew that. And I knew, as an adult, Wendy, as an adult, came to understand that critical jesting was the communication style he grew up with.
Oh, yeah.
So that was the communication style he delivered everything in. Critical jesting. That's all I knew growing up. That's how he always communicated with me.
Yeah.
And so how I took that to mean was, oh, my God, my father is so incredibly proud of me, beyond words, that the fact that he came up with that critical jest of why not all A+, was my dad's way of saying, I'm really proud of you.
Now, was there body language to go with that? Was he smiling when he said it, or was it like a twinkle in his eye?
Perhaps. I'd never really thought about it, but as I kind of feel into the energy, it's like I felt his pride. I really felt his pride, and it must have come through his body language or maybe his facial expression in a way. But I remember the words very distinctly, why not all A+. But now, spiral forward a couple years, and my other sister had a very similar experience, and she ran away from the table crying.
Aww.
That was devastating to her because she didn't know how to read my dad the way I did. Even though we were at the same age when this happened, she will tell you, well, she's the proverbial middle child, who's overlooked all the time.
Yeah.
But it was just fascinating in our family dynamics how my father could say what I would think is rather critical and rude things, and I didn't get my feelings hurt all the time. Sometimes I did. It depended on what it was.
Yeah.
But my little sister would get her feelings hurt almost all the time because she could not handle critical jesting at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so, from this dynamic, we just didn't have a family that acknowledged each other when we did something really great, not in a straightforward, I'm proud of you, well done kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that was something that I learned those skills by watching my friends' families.
Interesting.
I didn't learn it in my home, but I went to a lot of my friends' house, and I'd see, here's one, for example. My best friend, her name was Nancy growing up. That was her name. I only say that because she changed her name when she became an adult.
Oh, I was going to say,
friend,
I was going to make a joke about that. It turns out she actually did change her name.
Well, and it's weird because now she goes by Nan.
Oh, okay.
And I can't call her Nan when I think of a childhood story because she was Nancy then.
Sure, yeah, that's understandable.
But what I noticed at Nancy's house, it was her and her younger brother, and her mom would say, "Hey, kids, I'm going off to the grocery store." And Nancy and her brother Patrick would go and hug her goodbye and say, "I love you."
Wow.
And I'm thinking, this is so not like my household. And I thought, this is absurd behavior. What is wrong with these people? And I watched this over and over. But, the more I saw it, the more I went from absurd. I thought this was absurd to, now this has me curious. And then over time I went, this is really sweet.
Mm.
They love each other, and they actually express it to one another, even when someone's going to be gone only for an hour because they're going to the grocery store and they're on their way back. And I went, but not only do they hug one another, but they say, "I love you."
Mm-hmm. And
I'm like, we don't, and that's when I realized, I think I was about 17, 18 years old when I went, I don't ever remember other than being a baby,
mm-hmm.
I don't remember there ever being expressions of "I love you" in my family.
Mm.
No one ever said that. And I went, that's kind of bad. At least that's what I thought. I went, I want to be part of a family that's loving. I mean, I didn't need the Norman Rockwell picture, but I went, I want there to be something more than the critical jesting, because that we had in abundance.
Yeah, right.
And so I think it was 18 years old, and it was a really big deal for me when I expressed to my mother, when these moods struck me as appropriate, and I told her, "I love you." And she looked at me, and we both knew that was the first time those words had ever been spoken to each other.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Big oh my.
Yeah.
And then I did that with my father when I was 19. And it was another one of those things where he looked at me like he knew those words had never been expressed, and there was like shock and awe. I don't remember if he said it back to me or not, but the fact that I broke the pattern
Right.
by daring to speak those words was like a first. And then I did say to my parents, I said, I am going to start hugging. I am going to be a hugging kind of gal. And they looked at me, and I hugged both parents, because we would hug like our grandparents when we went to their house, or our aunts and uncles that we hardly ever saw. But we didn't like hug each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, I want us to be a hugging family. And I will tell you, today, we're a very, very hugging family.
Oh, how nice.
We might even hug 2 or 3 times as someone, like one of my sisters, as she was leaving yesterday. We'd already hugged in the living room, but now we were in the foyer, and she, hugged me again. I mean, that's how much of a hugging family we are. And I really know, Walt, I started that.
That's very cool. I mean, to have to know you had that kind of influence, and it shows when you have confidence in yourself, because that's what really happened. You had confidence in yourself. Anyone is able with confidence to shift family dynamics for the better. And it sometimes is something as simple and direct as what you did. You just kind of broke the ice on something that had never been done before. Now, I have to admit, I'm a little surprised that there had never been that kind of expression, just because that wasn't my experience. My experience was once again, somewhere in the middle, where it wasn't like we were devoid of any expressions of love or compassion or anything like that. We had them. They were just always low key. And it wasn't until later that they, perhaps warmed up even more. But for instance, if it was a traditional family in the sense that my dad worked, my mom stayed home, so she was the quote housewife unquote. And when he went to work in the morning and when he came home at night, there was always a goodbye greeting and a hello greeting and a kiss and a hug and all that kind of thing. But that was where it was limited to. For the most part, it wasn't Daddy's leaving, so say goodbye to everybody. He had to get out of the house. He had to get to work. It was that kind of thing. So it was there, but it wasn't there in abundance. And what you described is a situation of going from barren to overabundant. And that's wow. That's a big shift that went on there. So it proves that one can have a very positive, powerful impact even on a long-standing family dynamic. That's great that you proved that.
Thanks. And I like knowing that I was able to make that level of difference. But simultaneously, I will say, it's not like my family was void of any expression of affection.
Oh, good. I feel a little bit better then, because I was wondering, like, how do you go through life like that?
Well, because, like, and here's just the odd thing. Our family couldn't say the words.
Oh.
But, and we didn't do the hugging thing, but let's say there were 3 siblings sitting on the couch and we're all watching TV. Well, usually somebody's legs were hanging over somebody else's lap, or somebody was literally putting their head on somebody else's shoulder, or somebody saying, hey, play with my hair. So we had that aspect of affection. It just, we didn't say words.
The words
and if
weren't
words
there.
came out of our mouth, it was always critical jesting. Or we were picking on each other.
Okay, I got it. Yeah. Well, that makes more sense.
But we'd pick on each other and laugh at the same time. So that critical jesting was always meant as an expression of love and affection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just that it was said with words that weren't kind.
Which, of course, is like self-contradictory in a sense, and you always sense that contradictory nature somewhere below the surface, even though it never gets mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, and it's something that, for me, growing up, caused me to feel not solid in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened to me through the course of many different things occurring in my life, I felt being congruent in how I communicated was really important. And by the time I hit Bible college when I was 21, 22, I stopped the critical jesting like cold turkey. And it wasn't because I was in Bible college. Well, you know what? Maybe it was, because to speak with a critical jest felt wrong in an atmosphere where you're all like Bible students. And people, now I'm in Texas going to Bible college, and so I was reared in Chicago, where critical jesting is kind of a cultural norm.
Yeah.
But now I was with people from international, origins.
Right.
And I just thought, they're not going to understand. They'll think I'm being rude or cruel. So it was kind of a cold turkey thing for me, and I stopped being a critical jester, and I started being more affirmative with how I expressed my love or appreciation or acknowledgement for somebody. And when I did that, I have to say it felt so much better to me. I mean, sometimes I miss critical jesting because I could get much more, I could get people to laugh. There's a lot of joking that I learned how to do with critical jesting.
Oh, sure.
But when I was willing to be okay with I'm not getting the laugh, I looked at, but what am I getting? And I would get expressions of other people that I could tell they were just eating up my expressions of love or appreciation, and they really received it in a way that would really touch my heart. And I went, this is way better than critical jesting.
Yeah, it's much more effective.
And so then I started to pay attention to do my words match my tone of voice and my body language. And when I started to get all 3 of those in alignment, that's when I had the best congruent communication.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the purest, and people could really receive it the best, and it felt the best to me.
Sure. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When we were kind of talking over each other, I was going the exact same direction. You pulled them all together, and when you pull them all together, the impact is more than 3 times more. It's, 10, 20, 30 times more. It's so much more powerful. And I appreciate that.
And, and now that I understand law of attraction, the highest vibration that there is love, joy, appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
When you are really feeling that and experiencing that, it's like that's the highest form of creation, the highest form of any vibrational output you can have, but it's also you being in the receiving mode where everything you've ever desired is now like on a conveyor. This is how I like to think of it. It's on a conveyor belt ready to come to you as long as you keep that vibrational pattern open. And who knows, maybe, I didn't know law of attraction when I was 18, 19 years old, but maybe that was how I began to open myself up to receive, because I saw what was, and I wanted it different.
Oh, sure.
And I started infusing love into my family through different ways of expression that had never been there.
It's like Jerry Hicks often said while he was still alive, that people who come to Abraham Hicks's workshops or find their books or whatever, those books, those workshops, those tapes and so forth ended up in the hands of people who were ready to receive them. And what you're describing is the process of coming ready to receive the information. So yeah, I agree 100%. Of course it was setting up for later on running into in various ways law of attraction teaching. It had to. How could it not? And the fact that you start setting it up at that age was terrific, because that's really the best time to start doing it. That's when you start basically asserting yourself as an individual living your life. And when you do that and you do it in a positive way, well, we already know what happens with that. That leads to all kinds of good things. But it especially leads to, among other things, learning about the law of attraction.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing I want to do before we go any further here, if this is a conversation, as most of them are, that you're really digging, you're really getting into, just take a moment and share it on social media, because we're trying to get the word out to as many people as possible about these podcasts, the fact that they're daily, that you get your twice daily dose of happy, and that it's a great way to insert positivity into your life. Other people need that too. So just take a moment. If you're liking this, just go to your Facebook or your Instagram or your Twitter or Reddit or whatever you use, and just put on message. Please just say, "Hey, I'm listening to LOA today," and just say one sentence about why you like it. Because it'll not only help other people, it'll help you, and it'll help us too. It helps everybody. So that's it.
And I agree. And I totally agree. Because, I can't imagine doing any kind of work in life that is more valuable than spreading love, joy, appreciation, acknowledgement, celebration, a positive daily dose of happy. All of those to me are like the greatest, most highest value I think we can contribute to one another on this planet.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And in fact, one thing I really like about what we do with our podcast, the fact that we are helping to spread these kinds of very high level, high vibration, highly positive stuff, so to speak, with all of our listeners, and listeners are starting to share it and so forth. It is, I think, one of the very few ways that I know of, certainly one of the very few that's coming to mind right now, that are not necessarily religious in nature, meaning not tied to a particular religion, but are just a general sharing of the positive virtues, of the positive emotions and the positive well wishes. And how nice to have something that crosses cultural boundaries and doesn't have to be tied down to one particular, ism, so to speak. So that to me is like one of the things I love best about what we're doing.
Me too. Because even at my family Christmas, we have those that are still very involved in the Christian church,
sure.
and those that are very not involved, and some that are in between. And the whole religious concept just really doesn't ever come to the forefront in our family anymore. I mean, it did a long, long time ago.
Sure.
When people were starting to become adults and choosing their own thought process. But I have as much respect for the family within our whole bigger family that is still very involved in the Christian church. I know what it means to them. I know how it keeps them in a place of feeling like they're making a difference. And it's like, that's such a positive thing. I would never say, you need to leave that. It's like, no, that's actually the fuel to who they are. And it's a beautiful thing.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So very cool. While you were talking a few moments ago, I was thinking a little bit more about something in my family that I hadn't thought of in a long time, which was how it never seemed appropriate to say something that was boastful or like that you could be proud of for yourself. It's kind of like that was considered off limits. And so as a kid, there would be times that someone in the family would say, "You're just so boastful." Because if I said I was good at something, it's like that was not considered acceptable. I couldn't say I was proud of myself or I was good at something. But at the same time, from what I've told you, it's not like anybody else was going to say it to me.
Yeah, right.
So I'm like, all right, if I can't get it outside, I'll just say it for myself. Well, then I got labeled arrogant. And so that kind of was something I carried with me for a really long time. Like because they said it with such disdain. I knew they were saying, this is bad. And because I focused on that, like I don't like being called names that have a negative connotation, I focused on it a lot. And I've been called arrogant many times in my life. But probably in the last, I don't know, maybe 5 or so years, I realized, arrogance is not such a bad word. That just means this is how I've learned to reframe it. When someone says I'm arrogant, it's because really they're jealous because they don't give themselves permission to acknowledge their own internal greatness. And
That's
so when they see me doing it, instead of saying, wow, I wish I could do that too, they want to beat up on me for it.
Yeah.
But I no longer take that as a personal affront. If anything, I'm like, ooh, I have touched them in a way. They're going to have to think about this.
That's a good way of framing it. I like it. In fact, one thought that comes to my mind about it is a number of years ago, I found myself spending a lot of time contemplating and pondering the meaning of the word selfish. Because selfish is used very much the same way you were describing with the word arrogance. It's used as a demeaning description. The idea of being selfish is considered to be, well, I can think of it in terms of the Christmas holiday, the story of A Christmas Carol, right? Ebenezer Scrooge was selfish. He refused to help the poor. He only cared about himself. He only cared about his filthy money, and so on and so forth. That's the basic theme, and the story is of how he redeems himself by ending his selfishness and becoming more selfless and more interested in his fellow man. Which is understandable. I mean, there's definitely a very positive aspect to that story. But the problem with that is that if you define everybody in terms of selfish and selfless, then there is no way for self to be good. It's impossible. The only way to be good is to be non-self. And so anything that's self-related is bad. And I said to myself, that's insane. So when Abraham Hicks comes along into my life, and I'm listening to the workshop tapes and so forth and reading the books, and they're saying things like, everyone is selfish, and this is a good thing. I'm thinking, yeah. It's actually kicking me back to that earlier time when I was pondering all that stuff. And believe it or not, I wanted to find a way to replace what we call selfish with a different kind of word so that we could resurrect the original word selfish to mean just a good thing of being interested in oneself. And the word I came up with was otherblind. Because other blindness is what they're really claiming, what they're really complaining about when they're accusing somebody of selfishness. What they're really saying is, you're not paying any attention to anybody else. And that's what makes you selfish. So I said, okay, well, what they're really saying is otherblind. Now I can resurrect selfish as a good thing.
Well, I think that was quite clever and unique for you to come up with otherblind.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the rest of society never picked up on it, even though I've used it before. I get these quizzical looks from people, and they say, oh, well, that's nice, and they go on with their conversations. So it never really carried up onto a larger stage, but that's okay. But it was the first step. It was the first step toward a larger...
Soulful.
What is it?
As a soulful.
Soulful, okay.
As a word to talk about being selfish in a positive way.
Okay, yeah.
Where you're filling your soul. You're soulful. So I don't know. I think I've heard Oprah say it. I think I've heard others say that. I don't know if I use the phrase very much, but that was another alternative.
I can see that. I mean, I can't say I use that phrase either, but that word. But I could see it's a valid way to do it. I still don't like the idea of treating selfish as if it were a negative. I still want that word to be a positive. So when Abraham Hicks comes along and they say, well, everyone is selfish and that's a good thing, I was saying, yes. I was like celebrating. Like, here's this message coming across from the other side, validating what I've been feeling all along. That selfish is actually a good thing. And I love the examples they give to express how that is. They do it in a number of different ways, but one overall way of describing it is, have you ever noticed, they would say, that when somebody accuses somebody else of being selfish, what they really mean is, you're not living the way I want you to live.
Oh, yeah.
And boy, if that doesn't just lay it right on the table, because that's exactly what people mean when they say, you're so selfish. What they really mean is, you're not behaving the way I want you to behave, and I want you to behave that way because only if you behave that way can I feel good.
Exactly.
Which, by the way,
I will actually, you'll feel my sense of approval for you.
Well, more than that, I gotta throw this in here. They never seem to notice the fact that when they say, if you behave that way, I'll feel good, that is selfish. They never catch that part. They always skip that.
It could be because how Abraham Hicks describes it, they're saying that's what the internal, almost hidden dialogue is inside that person's head.
Yeah.
But they're not aware enough to even know that that's what they're thinking.
That's right, yes. So they're even less aware that it's also a selfish thing to do that, and that's okay to be selfish, just probably not that way. It's probably not the best thing to do for yourself. But,
exactly.
Oh my goodness. It is so true, though. It's so true how often that happens, how often people will fling that word at other people as if it were a derogatory word, and what they really mean is, you're not behaving the way that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
Which is really sick.
And so I'm searching my brain while you're talking. Like, I know I use it. I know I understand the concept, and I practice the concept of selfishness in the way that Abraham Hicks talks about it, where it's a very positive thing. And I think the phrase I use is self-care.
Oh, that's good.
That I take a lot of effort I practice self-care in many ways. Like even being at the table with my family yesterday, and they were so busy with gossip, I wasn't trying to insert, hey, I'm a #1 bestseller, actually for me to get accolades. I just thought it would be such a good way to interrupt their pattern that it would stop them, and it did, but only momentarily. But what I was practicing was my own self-care, because that conversation was creating an energetic environment that was not comfortable for me to be in.
Yeah.
And I will say, my attempt did work overall, because there was a whole lot of swirling energy on gossip, gossip, gossip. I kind of broke the pattern by throwing out my statement. They put a pause for just a second, and then they went back to it. But it had less momentum, and now that conversation fizzled out probably in the next 60 seconds.
Yeah.
And we moved on to something else. So even though it didn't stop immediately when I said what I did, it did put enough of a dent in it that it eventually stopped of its own natural causes, and we went on to something that was more delightful. Now, for me, that was me practicing self-care.
Okay.
Because I wanted to be with my family. I want to bond with my family. I want to enjoy my family. I just didn't want it to be in a negative way that we're talking about people and cutting them down.
Yes. Yes.
So the conversation ended up moving into things that were more positive that we could all then enjoy and, continue our conversation. But if it didn't, calm down, I would have left. I would have just gone and had a conversation with somebody else. Mm-hmm. That's me practicing self-care.
Right.
That's me being selfish enough that I'm not willing to keep myself in a place that feels not good to me.
Yes, I like that. That's good. That's a really good use of the word. It doesn't often get used that way, but that's a really good use of the word selfish, because that's exactly what that is. That is proper selfishness. Yeah. Yes. So
that's Wendy practicing self-care.
Yeah, that's good.
Which to me is Wendy's selfishness.
Yeah. And I still marvel at the whole idea about how people use the word selfish. Especially, I marvel at it when I understand the 3 laws of the universe as presented by Abraham Hicks, because their presentation of it in the book Law of Attraction is, the first law is the law of attraction, which I would say is like, it attracts like, the way they say it is that which is like unto itself is drawn. Personally, I like my wording better, but theirs is perhaps more accurate. The second one.
Yours is probably more King Jamesy.
King James, yes, right. That's good. I like that. So the second one is the science of deliberate creation, which is pretty much what we expect it is. That's where you're trying to apply the law of attraction. The third one is the art of allowing, which I'm still fascinated by the fact that a universal law they label as an art. I think that's really interesting. But the art of allowing is essentially I am willing to be what I am, and I'm willing to allow others to be what they are, which is the diametric opposite of defining selfishness as I want you to behave the way I want you to behave because it will make me feel better.
Yeah.
So when I hear Abraham Hicks describing it that way, I feel validation about my little Don Quixote quest to change the English language to turn selfish back into a good word. I feel like I was validated on that.
Well, this morning as I was in bed, I was actually thinking about the third universal law, which you just stated, which I probably won't state exactly like you did, but basically I am who I am, and I'm okay with you being who you are.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And when I think about that in terms of being a law, like the law of gravity kind of says if you push something over a hill, it's going to fall. So when I think about this as a law, somehow it doesn't feel law-like. It feels like a nice statement.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, I guess I'm looking for what's the end result. So if I'm okay with me being me, and I'm okay with you being you, I'm looking for, and then this will happen. And I'm not quite sure that, maybe Abraham states it in their book, and I just don't remember that part of it.
No, I think you got it right. I think they're actually being nice about it. I think Abraham is trying to put it in the nicest, most positive light possible. But if we were to reword it, I think what it really means is it is useless to try to get somebody else to behave the way you want them to behave in order to make yourself feel good, because you will never feel good that way. It just doesn't work. That's what the real law says. But so, they don't word it that way.
I wonder. Okay, I'm going to try taking a Wendy stab at it.
Okay.
I wonder if what it's saying is when I accept me for who I am, and I accept you for who you are, then I am not adding any resistance into my life, and I am therefore in a state of receptivity.
Right.
Where I am. That is the law of allowing. Allowing is being in a state of receptivity.
Right.
So that you can allow things to flow to you.
No, absolutely right. I think you've nailed it. That's exactly what it is. Yes. And
well, that's cool, because I woke up with that question, really a burning question this morning, going, I want to understand what that law is really trying to tell me. What benefit do I have? This is really where I was. What benefit is there to me accepting I'm okay with me and I'm okay with others? What do I get out of it?
Well, I think you've defined it.
I get a lot.
Yeah. You get everything.
It means I get to be in a state of receptivity.
That's right.
That's like the ultimate state of beingness. So, okay, I got that one handled.
So what do you get out of it? You get literally everything out of it. Without accepting that law, you don't get anything. Nothing good happens. You don't get nothing. None of the stuff that you're trying to attract actually arrives until you're willing to accept that law.
Yeah, because if I'm not accepting me as me, I'm throwing up resistance.
Right.
If I'm not accepting you as you, I'm throwing up resistance.
Right.
That's cool. So I don't know why I want so desperately to say this, but I do. I was reading some email, and it had all these steps on, how to do good stuff, and it was talking about the I am statement.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was suggested to write down like 10 or so I am statements, and then look at kind of like say them out loud, and the ones that feel really good to you, like those are really good affirmations, and the ones that don't feel so good to you, you have a little bit of work to do.
Okay.
And interestingly, I could only come up with, because I didn't spend a lot of time on it, I could only come up with one, and it was, I am inspiring.
Ooh.
And when I say that, it's everything in me resonates as solid gold. That feels so good to me. Like there's nothing I personally, Wendy Dillard, want more in life than to feel that I am inspiring. And that's both to myself and to others.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, I was wondering about that. That makes a lot of sense, too.
I love when I know that I'm in a state of being inspiring, because things are coming out of my mouth that inspire me and they inspire others. It's like, oh my gosh, that's me. I feel like that's my calling, is to be inspiring, but not a calling like something I hope to become. I know I already am that.
Well,
and when we started talking earlier about the thing about how in my family you couldn't make statements that would be arrogant, that would ultimately be one of those statements.
Well, with less than 45 seconds left, I'm afraid we have to limit our inspiration to that because we're out of time, believe it or not.
I'll be inspiring tomorrow.
We'll be very inspiring tomorrow. We'll be highly inspiring tomorrow. We'll do a lot of inspiring. There's not enough time to say it, but I'll just say if you haven't subscribe to the podcast. And if you're interested in calling Wendy to get some private sessions, they do that quickly. How do they do that?
Go to wendydillard.com.
There we are. Wendy, it's been a pleasure as usual.
All right. I loved it. Let's do this again tomorrow.
Okay, that sounds good to me. We'll see you all tomorrow here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye now.